Good evening, buenas noches, and thank you for tuning in. I'm Cristina Nosti, Events and Marketing Director at Books and Books in Miami, Florida, and tonight I'm thrilled to welcome you to our virtual evening with Mariana Enriquez to discuss Our Share of Night, published by our friends at Hogarth Press and translated from the Spanish by Megan McDowell. Mariana Enriquez is a writer and editor based in Buenos Aires. She has published 2 story collections in English, Things We Lost in the Fire and The Dangers of Smoking in Bed, which was a finalist for the International Booker Prize, the Kirkus Prize, the Ray Bradbury Prize, and the Los Angeles Times Book Prize in Fiction. To moderate this evening's conversation, we're joined by Silvia Moreno-Garcia, the author of the novels The Daughter of Dr. Moreau, Velvet Was the Night, Mexican Gothic, Gods of Jade and Shadow, and a bunch of other books. She has also edited several anthologies, including the World Fantasy Award-winning She Walks in Shadows, and she has won the British Fantasy Award and the Locus Award for her work as a novelist. Throughout this broadcast, please remember to post your questions for the speakers using the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. And thank you for purchasing your copy of Our Share of Night from Books and Books and for supporting independent bookstores everywhere. And now, without further ado, I'd like to welcome our guests to the virtual stage. Hello, welcome.
Hello.
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 How's it going?
I'm just going okay.
It's going okay. Well, thank you everybody for joining us today for this chat. We're going to be talking about 40 minutes and then we'll have questions for 10 to 15 minutes. Then we'll let Mariana go to have her dinner and that will be it. So I do ask you to please put the questions in the Ask a Question section. They'll be read out at the end of the session. So without further ado, hello, I'm so pleased to be chatting with you, Mariana. And I guess I want to start with how's it going? I mean, you had we published a lot of work in Spanish, and you've had a couple of collections translated into the English language, but this is your first novel that is being translated into English. How's it been? Has it been any different than your other experiences with the collections? Tell me more.
I think for a novel in general, there's more expectation. It's a bit frustrating. Frustrating is not the word, but it's a bit. I really like short stories. So it's like the idea that short stories are kind of a rehearsal for the novel, to me is kind of, wrong. So there's been a lot of expectation, and at the same time, well, it's receiving good reviews and stuff. So, everybody's happy. And I got to also publish a short story in the New Yorker. So, I'm happy in my both incarnations as a novelist and as a short story writer. But yeah, it's definitely different. More from other people than for me, I think.
Wonderful. And yes, everybody, the story is in the New Yorker. It's a ghost story, I guess, but that's one of the things in your work. I defining it is one of the challenges for me, but it definitely sits in this space of horror literature while it straddles other categories. But what got you interested in horror literature in the first place?
I think I started when I was young with the Gothic. That it's not horror, but it has elements of horror, and the ghost stories, and also I guess the fantastic from Argentina, and not only Borges and Cortázar, but also there's kind of the pagan beliefs and the urban legends and the whole mythology that it's kind of mixed with the everyday life. I went to Catholic school. My family is not religious, but that is kind of another hyper fantasy world going on there. But of all of it, I remember I liked it more when I was scared. Like I went on Jane Eyre, for example, and it starts with this kind of, she's like thrown in the ghost room, and I was like, oh, I like this. And yeah, and then the house when she's hearing the, it's not that I was disappointed that it's Bertha Mason, but it was interesting while it was a ghost. And then I don't know, the Secret Garden, the same. I wanted, not to be the son of the owner of the manor, but a ghost. And I found Wuthering Heights, and Wuthering Heights was all about horror, even if it wasn't a horror novel. And our local literary tradition, unlike other countries, I guess, in Latin America, has a lot of the fantastic, and some of it, especially Cortázar, goes a bit to horror. And I wanted to do it. And then I found Stephen King, and then I found, Shirley Jackson, and, it's not, we don't have, I don't think we have a tradition like our ghost. You read Rulfo, for example, and it's ghost, but it's not horror, and it's not a ghost story exactly. So I think I was drawn to it because it excited me. It made me feel something with literature, like it was a physical thing, like very thrilling. And then when I was older and I decided to write it, I find that it was a language that was very appropriate for talking about certain things that I really like to talk about, like violence and some realities, harsh realities of South America that are not only from South America. The thing is that I'm from here, and I like to do it in that language that is my language in a way.
Mhm. And with Our Share of the Night, can you remember what was the kernel of inspiration, the original idea that got you down the path to this novel?
Yeah, I was writing non-fiction and short stories for a long time, and I started writing novels, so I really missed the experience of the novel. It was like I really needed the obsession, the 2 years being, or whatever it was, obsessed with the characters. I needed the casting. I do castings, the casting of the places, the casting of I needed to be immersed in that world for a longer time, and the experience of the novel that is much more chaotic than writing short stories. I needed to let myself go, and I wanted to write a genre novel that also had all these other readings that you can have of it. But the first idea was the idea of the order, that is like these mean people that have all the power, and how they connect with this formless god that they talk to. That was a bit Lovecraftian, but then it changed completely when other characters started to come. But the first idea was a supernatural idea, because I really wanted to write a novel like that. And then, of course, it's also a political novel. It's also I don't know, a novel about parenting. I don't know, many things.
Um, it's also a novel about digging up the past. And,
Yeah,
and I think that seems to be a recurring motif in your fiction. Am I correct? Or did I
yeah,
imagine? Yes.
yeah, yeah. I think as a nation, in a way, as a nation, there's others kind of ways of dealing with trauma. Bringing trauma in the present is also a way of digging out the past, and sometimes not only digging the past, but the past coming from from like in Poltergeist. It's just it can be stopped. And I think in Argentina especially, we are very obsessed with I wouldn't say the past, because the past is like a large concept, but memory,
Mm.
and what we call the politics of memory. And we have no we we we're a society that talks politics all the time, that the dictatorship is very present, that every crisis that we had is very present, that is so present in the everyday life that we can't forget it, to the point that everybody mistrusts. I don't know. To me, it's very difficult to, for example, give up a job that I have, because in my mind, if I give up a job, everything will crash and I will end up in the streets. This is kind of the traumatic, because that happened. Actually, it happened to my family and it happened to a lot of people. And so, to me, to quote Faulkner, the past is not past at all. And I think it appears in general, let's say, with all these bodies, with all this obsession with things being unearthed, and I think memory and the digging of the past is an obsession that I kind of share with my countrymen, and what I'm trying to do is bring it to general literature in a way, not to be just. It's a very kind of serious sociological theme, and I want it to be a little less solemn, and admit that it's in our everyday life in a way.
Is it difficult to talk about some of that violence, some of that political history that underlines the history of your nation, and putting it in the book, or is it cathartic for you?
It's kind of at first, the main problem I had was that I felt, since I was writing it in horror, or in fantastic, or whatever, and many people consider it to be like minor genres or whatever, I was a bit cautious, or let's say concerned, that some people would think that I was not being respectful, let's say. If I write a short story about someone that's been killed by, I don't know, state violence, crime, whatever, and then comes back as a ghost, to me that is kind of honoring them. But for some people, that is kind of putting this person in some sort of entertaining way, and it could be sort of disrespectful. I mean, activists, family, etc. And then when I started doing it, I realized that there were a lot of voices of people that were born in the 70s or the 80s. That was when the dictatorship was, and many people that have been through as many crises as I've been to, and that they were finding other ways of talking about it, humor, absurd, even other, not only literature but movies. And there's a famous, for example, to give you an example of how it has changed. It was a war with the United Kingdom in '82 that we lost, and of course, and it's a very problematic thing, because people got very patriotic, and it was kind of a World Cup moment that was awful, because it was during the dictatorship, so it was kind of supporting them. And at the same time, when that war was lost, the dictatorship kind of fell because of that, because it was a desperate gesture of them to try to bring this patriotic thing to stay in power. So in itself is very ambiguous. The kids that went to that war were 18-year-olds. I remember writing letters to them. Malvinas is very far south. Many even died of cold, and it was awful. It was a massacre. And I didn't write anything about it, but there's a playwright, for example, that has a very, very successful play that has 3 real ex-soldiers from Argentina and 3 real ex-soldiers from the UK and it's a play that basically kind of makes them represent again some of the situations that they were involved, but also makes them talk. And at one point, you realize that they were enemies, but they're also kind of brothers in arms, because they're all soldiers, and this happened. And this war is in Argentina, it's a very stigmatized war, and in Britain, it's a very small war that nobody cares about. So all the people that suffer there are kind of they went there, and it was awful for them. So and that was a very striking thing to see, because it's like no, we don't talk to the British are our enemies. What is this talking about them? And for example, one of the Argentinians soldiers, in secret, he tells this in the it's true, but he tells this in the play, he plays the drums in a Beatles how do you say, like a covers band. And nobody knows, because it's like the British band. So it's very interesting how I was, but not only I guess in my country, but in the whole of Latin America, with a lot of new voices that are talking of these things and trying to find another way of speaking about it that is not the way of the accepted literature. And sometimes I don't really like to put things in these terms, but sometimes it's also very male kind of literature.
Here in Canada, we are always asking ourselves what constitutes Canadian literature. And
Yeah.
I think it's a nervous tick, because we're always looking to see what differentiates us from the United States, which is our bigger neighbor to the south. Do you think there's Latin American horror is fundamentally different from other types of horror, or no?
I think it is, but because in different countries, what happened I think in let's say in the Anglo-Saxon sphere or English speaking world, let's say, is that they had a very clear tradition. The fairy tales, the ghost stories, the Gothic, then in Victorian era, all the big novels from of the fantastic and of horror, from Dracula to the Turn of the Screw. I mean, to the very popular, to the very elegant of Henry James and stuff. But here, literature was for many, many years the privilege of the high class. And the high class kind of despised superstition, because they believed it was something of the, lower classes, of their servants, basically. For the same reason, they didn't care about their beliefs, that some are very fantastic about their cosmology. So you won't find that in literature. You find an Argentinian writer that's called Horacio Quiroga, for example, that lived half his life in the northeast of Argentina, where really you walk 2 meters and you find a ghost story, a pagan saint, someone that was killed there, and he wrote, and he's like a master of horror, but it's all realistic horror. It's like a Jack London, but everything goes bad always. Like in Jack London, it goes bad, but not all the time. And I think that, shutting off the beliefs of the indigenous people, the beliefs of the lower classes, the beliefs of the in Brazil, the same happens, and Afro-Brazilian religions and Afro-Brazilians' beliefs are absolutely shunned from literature, makes horror literature very European and very disconnected with what is going on in every sense and therefore it's a literature that is very well written sometimes, but it's very far away from what's going on in the society. It's like almost it's almost, except from someone that has a worldview that is very clear, like Borges or even Cortázar. You read the rest, and it's kind of, Clemente Palma in Peru, for example, is Poe. He really is Poe. He's like Poe in Lima. I'm pretty sure that if he got to the beliefs of the Incas, he could find something else. But he was a white Spaniard, so he couldn't do it. So I think that changed a lot in the last years, because that the racism still exists, but of course we are a continent that is very, very racist, but at the same time that really changed, and many of the younger writers are trying to, in a way, trying to find out what would have been of that literature if it wasn't a literature that was looking at Europe so much. And I think, especially in writers my age and younger, that is kind of something that we've been exploring a lot. Like, let go of France and let go of England. Like, we are not that. Like, really, we are not.
As you mentioned, in Latin America, we have a huge tradition of consuming of Anglo-Saxon literature, American literature, French literature as part of our daily diet. But it's not the same
Yeah.
thing in England or in the United States, knowing about Latin American literature or knowing about the conditions of Latin American life, the history of these nations. Like you said, a significant war for you is a war that does not register in Great Britain
Yeah.
as it happened. Has that been a problem with some of your stories? Some of that, or perhaps some of that culture shock, or people coming maybe with an idea of what your books would be like, maybe saying there was not enough gauchos in this book, so I didn't like it, something like that.
I tried from the very beginning to do something that maybe it's not the best thing to do as a writer. When I mean it's not the best thing, is that the best thing as a writer is just write. But I tried a lot to talk with the readers and have a relationship with the readers to give a bit of context, because what I found out is that many of the readers, especially in the Northern Hemisphere, have no idea at all. It's not only that they want the gaucho or the tango, it's that they don't know anything at all. Or they have an idea that is very, one idea, like Latin America is dangerous and it's all the same. And people look in a certain way, and I had a lot of issues with the thing, for example, not as much in the literature, but with me as a writer. Like, for example, doesn't matter where, but in many situations, asking me, do you want to be presented as a writer of color? And I'm like, I am a writer of color to you because you're Caucasian, but in my country, what we consider people of color are mainly people of indigenous descent, not like me, that are mostly from Southern European descent, that had a lot of discrimination, a lot of problems, that are still despised, they have a lot of less opportunities, and that's only because of where they come from and how they look like. That they look like a bit different. So the thing to me was like, of course, I have no. I mean, it's almost like something I really identify with, to be a writer of color in the context of the US, for example. But if I come back to Argentina and my fellow writers and readers see that I'm presenting myself as a writer of color, it's like I'm doing like cultural appropriation. And not only that, but I'm, using my Latin American status to be something that I'm not. And it's kind of very offensive for someone here that is really a person of color. So that kind of, translation or noise in the translation is always there. So I always try to talk about it and be the most honest about it, and not being scared about it, about these issues that sometimes are very complicated for people to talk about, because I think that I don't know much about Asian literature, for example. And I would really like, to someone to explain to me what is the main difference in the literature of Malaysia from the literature of Vietnam, and why, and what's the history behind, and what's going on, and how, where are the problems they have with each other, if they don't have problems with each other, what is the the geopolitics of the region, and how it shows in the books, because I don't know. So when I think about that, of all the things I don't know of many literatures in the world, I think I would like the writers to explain to me the context. It will never be enough. Things will always be lost in translation, and sometimes it's cool that they are lost in translation. Like I was young, I was reading Dostoevsky, and I don't know if St. Petersburg is like that. It doesn't matter. It was, there's palaces and it's cold, and that was enough. But today that we can communicate a bit more, and I think that literatures don't have to be that isolated if you have the writer willing to tell you, this is where I come from, and this is what the place where I'm writing from. That is not a minor thing to me.
And talking about translation, what is a translation process like for you? Do you get to go over the drafts, or do you get to talk to a translator? Does it feel weird when you read yourself in English? I feel weird when I read myself in Spanish.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, in other languages, for example, like in French or in Portuguese and Italian, they're very similar to Spanish.
Yeah.
And they're Latin languages, and it's very transparent. It doesn't feel like somebody else wrote it to me. But when I read it in English, that is the only language that it's very different from the Spanish language that I can read. It really feels like that's not my writing. Not in a bad way, because I really love how Megan does it, but Megan McDowell, that she's absolutely brilliant. But what happens is that the transformation is very extensive of the text, and it's a very, very different text. I like what she does. I trust her. I don't go through the draft at all, but that's also because I'm not very controlling as a person, and I really just answer what I trust her, so I know that the doubts that she has are very precise. She thinks about them a lot, and I try to we exchange a lot in those moments, but sometimes we exchange a lot of pictures, for example, because she can't get a sense of place, and place in my writing is very important and stuff. But yeah, like the other day we did a reading, very small reading of the same part, and she was reading it in English and I was following it in Spanish, because then I had to read the same part, and I was like, wow, it's a different, like, she, to me, there's so much she puts in it, because I think I'm not dismissing at all the writers in languages that are more transparent, but it's much more similar. You have to look less for the words and for the music, and this she needs to what she has to do. It's very difficult, and I really admire what she does. But yeah, it's very weird. It's like it's my story, but it's not me. Something like that.
Very cool. You mentioned music. You
Yeah,
like music a lot. You have a deep
yeah.
connection with music. Tell me about that.
I I I started listening seriously to music when I was 13, something like that. At 13, for example, I lived in a town 50 kilometers from Buenos Aires. It's called La Plata. It's a very nice town, like a university town, but it's so near that the connection with the city is not very good. And I ran away basically from home. I lied to my mother to go and see The Cure. This is a pattern. And yeah, and 2 years later I did the same. I was older, but she didn't know, to see Iggy Pop. And I remember I ended up in an interview, kissing Iggy. Hello, Iggy, if you're there. And if you remember, but it was very cool. But I mean, I started to study when I was very young, journalism, because I wanted to be a rock journalist. I lived in the music. I had musician boyfriends. And I started writing, like my first novel. I write it with listening to music, with a lot of music quotations, and I still do that. I still do the the playlist. I still do the writing with music, not in Spanish because it interferes a lot. Like there's something, it's a language that I can understand. But even if I can understand English very well, I can switch off. And it gets abstract very quickly. And so I lived that life for a long time. I was a rock and roll journalist for a long time, like 13 years or something like that. So it was a lot of night. It was a lot of, and I get a lot of inspiration of that because I know that life. And I know that kind of in Our Share of Night, there's a whole part where it happens in London. Of course, I wasn't in London in the 60s, but I kind of know, how the cool girls and boys and the clothes and the things happen. And so that was helpful. And watching, forever things from the period too. So yeah, to me, it's very important nowadays that rock and roll is kind of a extinct beast. I kind of, in journalism, I moved away and I let the young ones to explain to me what's going on. And I kind of like it. That it's kind of a secret, that is something of the past, that is kind of my thing in a way. And yeah, and yes, I just come from Australia. I went to Australia for 2 months. My husband is Australian. It's not that we are that rich to be 2 months there, but mostly we went to see Nick Cave. And I saw 5 shows, which is insane because the shows are all the same. So it's not, I was just trying to hold his hand, which didn't happen, by the way. And yeah, so, but at the same time, I found the title of my next book in one of his songs. Like listening to the song, I said, "Oh, that's the thing." I get a lot of inspiration from that and of the performance. I really admire performance in general. Like going there and being like that kind of demigod, to me is something, old. I think of the, like a Greek kind of idea of Orpheus and this kind of musicians that people went crazy about and kind of changed the moment. So yes, it's something I wish I could write like a musician.
Well, there's a musicality to your sentences, I think. But
Thanks.
yeah, we've got 5 more minutes of conversation, so I just want to invite people to ask your questions if you haven't asked them, and please do in the Ask a Question button. I want to go back for 1 second to Our Share of Night before we kind of wrap up this part. It's a lot about family too. I mean,
Yeah.
it is about horror. It's about cults. It's about different time periods, but it's also a lot about family and relationships within families and how fraught they are. Was it difficult to write that? Because I found, I found some sections pretty difficult to read for me because thinking about my own family and things like that.
Yeah, I understand. I think it could be difficult for, especially with children
Yes.
and the abusive relationships with children. No, it wasn't. But I'm very brutal that way. But what was difficult was trying to get into the dynamics of a very dysfunctional family that had to be written from scratch, because since it's a family that has a lot of of course you can, you steal from everything. A writer steals from everything, but this is a uber rich family. This is a father that is a medium, a mother that, three old ladies that are kind of the like some kind of Macbeth witches. So how does that work? And to make it like a realistic kind of relationship, especially the relationship of father and son. Though of course I don't I haven't experienced, because I'm not a father and I'm not a son, and my father wasn't at all like that. And so I read a lot, I watched a lot, I saw a lot how in families, especially between father and son, there's a lot of competition. It's a very competitive relationship, the relationship there. And it's of course in that register, but they are competitive. Like Gaspar is very um, vivacious and young and healthy, and his father is super gloomy and he's very sick. So he loves him and he's trying to save him from destiny, but at the same time he does it in a very brutal way because he desires that body. And he's very, and you can see in men when they get older, and the with the younger sons, that there's a kind of, you know watching in happiness how the son is growing, and in kind of with a kind of envy, the decadence of their own body, and the very vivacious space where the the son is. And with the mother, I decided a mother that is puts the family first and not her own child, which is kind of it goes against all the, I think, fictions about motherhood. And I think motherhood has all kinds of shades. And you have and even the mother that is very protective of the children can be very damaging of the children. So all that was very, I had to think about it a lot. It was a lot of intuition, but I have to watch a lot, and also in a way not to be, that probably happens to you and to many people, not to be timid about that, because sometimes when there is violence in a family, it's absolutely devastating. So if I'm going to write about violence in a family, it has to be like that, devastating. And it's, so I think the family relationships, even in the bubble of the occult that they happen in, are quite realistic, if you think in a family that is absolutely dysfunctional and toxic.
Yeah, it's definitely not a timid book.
No.
It's a lovely book, though, a very interesting novel. But what's next for you? You said you came up with the title for your next novel by
Yeah,
listening to Nick Cave. So what's it called and what's it about?
it's about ghosts, and I think it's a bit more about the decadence of Argentina. As I'm thinking about, I think sometimes this is a country that kind of disappears. It disappears from the global, importance of everything, and what happens here nobody knows. And I'm sometimes feel very, even if we have famous people like Messi and Che Guevara and the Pope, and like it's a very strange country, because you have this very famous person, and then it goes away, Borges, and but that I'm still investigating. Like I'm investigating a lot about ghosts and spiritualism, and I want to write like a bit end of the world thing, but I don't want it. I want to be very gothic. I don't want it to be Mad Max at all. I don't want people looking for water and riding in cars. I don't want anything like that. I can't stand it anymore. I just want like a slow, dark disappearance of things, and that's very ghostly. That's very phantasmagoric. But I'm still in the process of investigating that. But I'm writing short stories. Like I came back and I started, and I have like 5 or 6 short stories, and with a bit more done, and I have a book. And and the book is the short stories had a lot about body and body horror, and I think it's like a kind of aftermath of the pandemic. Like we've been talking about illness so much, about death so much, about counting the bodies, about the vaccine. Is the vaccine working? Doesn't know. I have 2, I have 3, I have 5, I have only 1, and somehow all that kind of, start ticking in my head in a different way. And it came like we kind of put the body and mortality first for an unusual amount of time. Like we don't think about that much in everyday life. And then suddenly it was 2 years of counting bodies. So it started I had to get it out, I think.
Beautiful. I look forward to it. I think it's a very exciting time. I think horror was kind of had its boom period in the 80s and then went quiet, and now we're having, I think, another mini boom period. So I look forward to more short stories from you, and another book that is not like Mad Max or Waterworld, but different kind
Yes,
of
exactly. Like
yeah, end of the world scenario. But I think that's the time that we have for our conversation, and now we're going to switch to some questions and answers. If people haven't put their question in the Ask a Question box, please do so now. It's been lovely chatting to you, and let's see what people are curious about.
We have
okay.
a lot of questions. So Alan would like to know, what was the inspiration behind Gaspar as a character? Was it a real child, a historic figure, etc.?
No, it's just an imagination. I wanted to write a story about a father and a child, and the books I read a lot to do it were The Road by Cormac McCarthy, and the Stephen King book that nobody talks about, that is Firestarter, that also has a girl that is running away with a sick father. So yeah. And no, it's he's been here.
Thank you. Victoria would like to know, is Our Share of Night going to be adapted into some kind of movie or series? She heard a rumor about Alfonso Cuarón and a series.
There is a rumor about that. There is I'm going to be very short about it, but maybe Silvia, this happened to her too. There's a lot of indecision about what to do with stories that happen in Latin America. Like there's a whole market, there's a whole thing, and they have some money in the streaming services and stuff, but not enough. It all goes, so it's kind of, they don't. I think we have to wait a bit. But there's a lot of things going on. The thing is that you need more money. It's absolutely insane, but you need more money to do something from Latin America, because they somehow they think that it's not going to have the audience they expect, and there's not that much experience, and which is ridiculous, because it's not also Cuarón, but Guillermo del Toro has done the cabinet of, there's a lot of talent, especially in Mexico. So, but let's see. That rumor is a rumor that has its foundation, but nothing has been signed
Fingers
yet.
crossed.
Yeah.
Were the parallelisms between Juan and Eddie planned, or did they come naturally? And did the history of the occult have any kind of inspiration for the novel?
I studied a lot of history of the occult. Yeah, in fact, the order is inspired in a real order. That is the order of the Golden Dawn. And I wanted that in particular because Aleister Crowley was there, Bram Stoker, the author of Dracula, was there, William Butler Yeats, the poet and Nobel Prize from Ireland, and it had a lot of women. It had a very different relationship with women. The women mostly they were illustrators and did the tarot, for example. Arthur Machen. It was a place that brought together a lot of writers, and so that is a bit like a twinkle there. And I studied a lot of the occult and the parallels between Eddie and Juan, where I thought about them a lot because I wanted like two young men in this case, sacrificed for this, crazy desire of these people to perpetuate themselves, and they are both destroyed. Even if Juan functions, and Eddie was driven mad by her own mother and by his own mother. I mean, but yeah, I they are, you know mirrored even in tarot. That would be another long thing because I studied a lot of tarot to use different cards for them.
Thank you. From Chris, how do you think about structure and narrative arc between your short and long form fiction? Are you drawn to certain ideas or concerns more from one to another?
Like in short fiction is mostly an idea, and I'm very classic about that. It's mostly an idea that then it's kind of, I use the characters and everything as, instrumental to the idea that I want to put out. In the novel, I'm not that much in control. In the novel, I have a structure that is kind of loose in a way, or it can be movable. I know the arc. I know the ending at the beginning. In this case, it was in a way, it was an education kind of story. It's about Gaspar losing his identity and finding his identity. That I knew that's the journey that I needed to do with him. Uh, but then in the middle, things happen, and I think in a novel you have to let go. I mean, I have friends that even have the even have notebooks with every chapter, like they're doing a building or something, like they're engineers. And to me, that falls in 10 minutes because another thing happens, and then this character does something that you don't want him to do, but he does it anyway. And that's the nature of the novel. In the novel, in its, I think, in its center is a bit chaotic, and you have to respect that arc, and then in the middle kind of let them play.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Are you ever going to write more stories situated in the universe of Our Share of Night, like a sort of Stephen King kind of thing?
I don't think so. No. I mean, I'm writing now, and I'm writing short stories, and they are completely, I don't know if I'm completely, but they are quite different. No, I think I did what I just said. I left Gaspar in the place that I wanted to bring him to, and I don't know what else to do with him, because now that would be his story. I know it could be lots of multiverse thing, but I rarely do that. And the novel appeared in Spanish in 2019, so I'm really kind of far away from it. Like, I do remember it because with every translation and stuff, you have to talk about it and stuff. But emotionally, you fall in love with the characters. Then when you correct them, you kind of hate them because they become language again and not people like they were when we are writing it. And then you kind of let go, and you let them go for the people to read. So now with them, I'm in the space of they are not mine anymore. So
That's
I can't
beautiful.
write them about them anymore.
That's beautiful. And I can see Silvia nodding, relating to that. Do you think Juan did the right call by not telling Gaspar everything from the beginning? Would you think he'd do it again, even knowing how everything went down? Without any spoilers. I'm not sure if you're going to be able to answer
Oh,
that.
that's difficult without any spoilers.
Yeah.
But I think being how he is very volatile, and but he's very bloody minded too. Like he's very. So I think he would do the same, and hopefully he did it in the frame of time. Let's. I mean, when he wasn't mad enough to be even more tough with the child, because the Juan is going insane too. That it's kind of, since it's from the point of view of Gaspar, you can't really see it that much because I move away from Juan and I go into the child, and the child is kind of used of this father is very mad. So but he's in a very fragile state of mind. So yes, he will do it again, and hopefully and I'm very glad that I made him do it in this in this time, because otherwise give him 2 months and I don't know what he would be able to do. But no, he would never tell him from the beginning. No, not at all, ever. No.
So, how does Stephen really feel about Juan and vice versa? Because I'd like to think there's a genuine bond of love there, but there are also some hints where it's kind of alluded that the medium condition of Juan, or Juan being a medium, plays a big role in their relationship, like the magnetism that he has.
Oh, I think they're in love, and I think that's the only part of the novel that I would dig a bit more. In fact, there was more, and I decided to get it out and let it more mysterious because I wanted that ambiguity. Like, are they really in love, or is it because Juan is super attractive to everybody, so he's drawn to him too, and he's pansexual? And but no, they really. I think there's a bond there. It's not just a lover or just a companion to do sex magic or something like that. It's is his partner in a way, like his wife and like Tali. I mean, he has a very, and he has a lot of respect for him. He's the only, if you read the novel, he's the only one that teases him and uh, and kind of disrespects him and takes care of him much more than any. And he lets himself being taken care of him. It's and that's love for me. Let him when you are someone like Juan that is so powerful in a way, to put yourself in the hands of this man and put your child in the hands of this man. It's unfortunate that that Stephen couldn't take care of his son, but you have to read the novel to know why.
Mhm. Okay. On the line of what you were saying about horror or fantastic literature considered more as minor genres, how do you feel about the increasing interest and space that this kind of narratives are having, both from the readers and from academia?
Space as in the cosmos, or
Um, no,
space as in,
the space that's being created, I think
okay.
narrative.
uh, because we have, there's a lot of cosmic horror that is very kind of important in academia now too. um I think that there's a kind of acceptance of what I would call popular genres more than minor of anything. And that I include melodrama, and I include thrillers or noir, and neo-Gothic. And I think there's an understanding that all these narratives come from a very, like, even a different social class, and a different readings, that not everybody read the same, when not everybody had the same corpus, when they don't come from academia, when they come from different families. And I think that hopefully, because it's kind of beginning, I think it's a sign of diversity in the best way. Like understanding that someone that read a lot of romantic novels can be a great writer, because there was a time when that was an
Yes.
oxymoron, and I don't think now it's true at all. Or that someone that writes thrillers can't write anything else, and that's even, like, I genuinely admire thriller writers, because I can't remember a clue for my life. I would be a disaster. Yeah.
Thank you. So one question from me.
Yeah.
Do you ever scare yourself as you're creating these scenarios and writing? And do you scare yourself
Unfortunately,
with
no.
where you're going?
I mean, unfortunately, because I think I have some kind of problem at this point, because many people ask me that, and I'm like, I will start that saying, no, I was really scared in this part. No, no, not at all. And no, I enjoy it, and I get scared in real life of these kind of things. I mean, if someone tells me, when someone is a good storyteller and tells me a spooky story in a good way, I get really, I put the lights on, I check. And with movies, I get very scared sometimes too. But when I'm doing it, it's like I'm very professional about it. So it's like, well, okay, let's cut this arm and let's see how it's done. So I'm googling. If I guess my search history is. I hope I have to change my computer, I guess, because this is kind of, yeah.
Oh
Yeah,
my,
no, but no, 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 never.
thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Well, we've come to the end of the hour, but thank you so much for a wonderful conversation.
No, thank you so much, Sylvia. Thank you very much. It's like being interviewed by a superstar. It's very strange. Like, I really admire your work, and you know that.
Thank you so much. It's been wonderful, and thank you for everybody who's been watching. Please, if you haven't bought it, if you haven't read it, get your copy of Our Sugar of Night, with books and books. And yeah, and have a great night, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you the next time. Thank you. Good
No,
night.
thank you for having me. Bye